Tonight, we confront a story unlike any other in the history of American crime. A story that continues to disturb investigators, survivors, and anyone who dares to look into it. At the center of this case is a man named David Parker Ray. To most of his neighbors in the quiet town of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, he was simply a mechanic, quiet, unassuming, and ordinary. But behind that ordinary image was a reality so dark, so carefully hidden, that even the most experienced FBI agents would later admit the evidence they uncovered was among the most horrifying they had ever seen. David Parker Ray was not satisfied with control in everyday life. He engineered a secret world contained within a soundproof trailer he called the Toy Box. Inside, he designed a chamber of pain, equipped with restraints, medical tools, chains, and devices intended to break down not only the human body, but also the human mind. Every part of it was built with one goal: to strip away freedom, hope, and identity from the women he chose as his victims. What made his crimes more disturbing was not only the physical torment, but the psychological cruelty. Before he began, Ray would play an audio tape, a recording he had scripted and rehearsed, where in a cold, detached voice he explained to his captives exactly what was about to happen. These tapes, discovered by investigators, revealed a methodical, calculated approach. He wanted his victims to know they were trapped, and that nothing about their suffering was accidental. It was planned, it was deliberate, and it was designed to leave scars that would never heal. For years, women vanished around the region. Some escaped, but many did not. The FBI would later estimate that David Parker Ray may have killed as many as 60 women, though almost no bodies were ever recovered. His own journals detailed abductions stretching back decades, filled with chilling notes and records of his acts. Yet, without the testimony of those who survived, and without the chance discovery that finally brought his crimes to light, his secret chamber may have never been exposed at all. This is not a story of quick violence or sudden outbursts. It is the story of patience, planning, and cruelty hidden in plain sight. It is the story of a man who lived among his neighbors while carrying out horrors in the desert of New Mexico. And it is a story that forces us to ask how many victims remain forever unidentified, their final moments silenced within the walls of the toy box. If you are new here, and you value deep explorations of the most disturbing true crime cases, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. Because tonight, we will uncover the chilling truth about David Parker Ray, the man who came to be known as the Toy Box Killer. To understand the full weight of the crimes committed by David Parker Ray, we must first step back and examine who he was, where he came from, and how the environment around him shaped the man he would later become. Born on November 6, 1939, in Belen, New Mexico, Ray grew up in a family fractured by instability. His father, a violent alcoholic, was often absent, and when he was present, his presence brought fear rather than comfort. Accounts suggest that Ray was subjected to abuse and neglect from an early age. It was a childhood marked not by nurturing, but by exposure to cruelty and the erosion of trust. During his teenage years, troubling signs began to surface. Classmates recalled that he was withdrawn, awkward, and sometimes bullied. It was during this period that Ray is believed to have developed a disturbing fascination with sadomasochism and control. Hidden away from the eyes of his peers, he began collecting pornographic magazines that depicted bondage and torture. By the time he was a young adult, those images had transformed into sketches and detailed notes, suggesting that his imagination was not only active, but dangerous. These early writings would foreshadow the meticulous planning that defined his later crimes. Ray's adult life appeared ordinary on the surface. He served in the U.S. Army as a mechanic, a role that gave him technical skills he would later repurpose for his trailer of horror. After his service, he drifted between jobs, eventually settling as a mechanic in Elephant Butte, near the town of Truth or Consequences. Neighbors saw him as quiet and capable, someone who minded his business and caused little trouble, but beneath this facade, Ray was already constructing the double life that allowed him to hide in plain sight. The 1990s setting of Truth or Consequences adds another layer to this story. It was a desert community, remote, sparsely populated, and largely overlooked. Its quiet roads and vast stretches of land provided cover for someone who did not want to be seen. It was the kind of place where people came and went without much notice, where a disappearance might not immediately draw suspicion. This environment suited David Parker Ray perfectly. The people most deeply affected by Ray's choices were his victims. While it is believed that dozens of women passed through his toy box, 3 survivors stand out in the historical record. Cynthia Vigil, a sex worker who fought for her life and escaped in 1999, became the key figure who finally brought Ray's crimes to the attention of law enforcement. Before her there was Angelica Montano, who reported being kidnapped and assaulted by Ray, though her case did not lead to charges. And then there was Kelly Garrett, a young woman lured into Ray's trap by someone she trusted. Each of these women had their lives altered in ways no one could ever truly repair. Ray was not alone in his crimes. His girlfriend, Cindy Hendy, played an active role, helping him lure and restrain victims. She would later confess her involvement and testify against him. Even more disturbing was the suggestion that Ray's own daughter, Glenda Jessie Ray, was complicit, with allegations that she may have helped facilitate some of the kidnappings. Their participation underscores that this was not just one man acting in isolation, but a small network of complicity that allowed his crimes to persist for years. As the background unfolds, we see a portrait forming, not just of one man, but of the circumstances that allowed him to operate unchecked. A troubled childhood, a fascination with control, a quiet desert town, and a circle of enablers. These details lay the foundation for the chilling crimes that were yet to be revealed, crimes that would eventually shock not only the local community, but the entire nation. Inside a quiet corner of Elephant Butte, hidden away from the unsuspecting community, stood a trailer unlike any other. From the outside, it appeared ordinary, no different from the countless mobile homes scattered across the New Mexico desert. But once the door was closed, the reality was nightmarish. David Parker Ray called it the toy box. To him, it was a carefully designed chamber of torment. To the women who were taken inside, it was a place where time seemed to stop, where every second became a battle between hope and despair. The trailer was soundproof, ensuring that no screams would ever escape its walls. Chains were fastened to the ceiling and floor. A gynecological chair was bolted firmly in place, equipped with leather straps to immobilize the body. Along the walls, investigators would later find shelves lined with surgical instruments, whips, clamps, and other tools specifically chosen to cause pain. Even more disturbing, Ray kept medical manuals and detailed diagrams that suggested his cruelty was not random but calculated. He studied how to prolong suffering, how to ensure his victims endured not just physical agony, but psychological collapse. Perhaps the most haunting element of the toy box was the audio tape. Before beginning his assaults, Ray would play a pre-recorded message for his captives. In it, he introduced himself not as a man, but as their captor and tormentor. His words were cold, emotionless, stripped of any trace of humanity. He explained in chilling detail what they could expect, how long they might remain inside, and what rules they were forced to obey. Survivors later recalled that listening to this tape was like being sentenced before a judge who offered no chance of appeal. It was not only a declaration of control, but a psychological weapon designed to erase any thought of escape. Cynthia Vigil, one of the few who survived, remembered the overwhelming fear as the tape played. She was chained, stripped of her freedom, and made to understand that every part of her existence now depended on David Parker Ray's will. For Ray, this was the essence of power, the complete domination of another human being. For his victims, it was the beginning of an ordeal that felt endless. Ray's crimes were not crimes of passion or sudden bursts of violence. They were rehearsed, prepared, and executed with chilling patience. He kept journals documenting his actions. He recorded details of women, dates, and the methods he used. These records suggested that the toy box had been in use for years, possibly decades, long before Cynthia's escape finally brought it to light. Though investigators later connected Ray to numerous disappearances, most of the women he targeted were never seen again. The desert surrounding Elephant Butte and Truth or Consequences became a silent accomplice, vast, remote, and unforgiving, a landscape where secrets could remain buried forever. The FBI would later estimate that as many as 60 women may have entered the toy box and never come out. Without bodies, these claims remain unproven, but the evidence inside the trailer pointed to a scale of crime far greater than anyone initially believed. Every detail of the toy box spoke to one man's obsession with control, fear, and suffering. It was not just a place of physical imprisonment, but a world designed to strip victims of hope, forcing them to endure both the cruelty of the moment and the crushing weight of despair. On March 22, 1999, the hidden world of David Parker Ray began to unravel. That morning, a woman named Cynthia Vigil was held inside the toy box, chained and terrified. She had been abducted the previous night and already endured hours of torment. But unlike so many before her, Cynthia refused to surrender. As Ray and his girlfriend Cindy Hendy grew careless, leaving her momentarily unattended, she seized her chance. Using every ounce of strength, she managed to free one arm from the restraint. In the struggle that followed, she struck Hendy with a lamp, grabbed the keys to her chains, and stumbled out of the trailer. Cynthia's escape was frantic and desperate. She ran barefoot through the desert streets of Elephant Butte, wearing only a metal collar and padlock around her neck, chains clattering as she moved. Neighbors who saw her at first did not know what to make of the sight. But Cynthia's cries for help were enough to bring assistance, and soon she was taken into police protection. Her words, though shaken and broken, described a nightmare no officer on duty that day could have imagined. She spoke of a trailer filled with instruments of torture, of recordings played to her, of a man who had promised her nothing but pain. Law enforcement responded immediately. When investigators entered David Parker Ray's trailer, they found the truth matched Cynthia's account in horrifying detail. Every wall, every shelf, every surface inside confirmed years of calculated cruelty. There were chains bolted into the floor, medical instruments stained with use, photographs, diagrams, and most disturbing of all, the audiotapes. Agents later said the contents of those tapes were among the most disturbing things they had ever encountered. They revealed not only the physical acts Ray carried out, but also the cold precision of his words, spoken as if rehearsed for an audience of fear. Alongside the tapes, investigators uncovered Ray's handwritten journals. These were not mere notes, but records of years of abduction and abuse. In his own words, he documented victims, the methods he used, and the dates when they were taken. Some entries seemed to reference women who had never been reported missing, deepening the mystery of how many lives he truly claimed. At first, there was disbelief. The sheer scale of what Cynthia described seemed impossible, but as the evidence piled up, the reality became undeniable. Officers realized they were not just looking at one abduction, but the possibility of dozens of unsolved disappearances connected to a single man. The investigation widened quickly. Ray was arrested, along with Cindy Hendy. In custody, Hendy confessed to her involvement and began to reveal details of Ray's crimes. She described how the toy box was used, how women were restrained, and even how Ray disposed of evidence. Her cooperation gave investigators insight into the years of horror that had gone undetected. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence of torture, proving murder would prove nearly impossible. The desert yielded no bodies, and without remains, prosecutors faced significant challenges. Still, the investigation laid bare the scale of David Parker Ray's depravity and confirmed Cynthia Vigil's account beyond question. The case that began with one woman's escape was now unfolding into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations the state of New Mexico had ever seen. When the case of David Parker Ray reached the courtroom, it carried with it the weight of years of hidden suffering. The charges brought forward were staggering in their detail, though notably absent were charges of murder. Without bodies, prosecutors could not pursue homicide, even though investigators were convinced that many women had never returned from his trailer. Instead, the trial focused on what could be proven: kidnapping, sexual assault, and torture. The testimony of survivors became the foundation of the case. Cynthia Vigil, who had endured hours inside the toy box before making her desperate escape, stood before the court and told her story. Her words painted a picture of unrelenting fear, of being chained, gagged, and forced to listen to the recording that stripped away any illusion of safety. She spoke of the moment she found her chance to fight back, of the strike against Cindy Hendy, and the panic as she fled through the streets with chains still around her body. Her account, unwavering despite its horror, brought the courtroom into the very nightmare she had lived. Other survivors added their voices. Kelly Garrett recounted how she had been drugged on the night of her escape from a party, lured by someone she trusted into the hands of David Parker Ray. She described waking up inside the toy box, restrained and helpless, subjected to the same terrifying routine. Then there was Angelica Montano, who told the court how she too had been taken, only to be released later in the desert, left disoriented and broken. Their testimonies confirmed what investigators had pieced together from journals and physical evidence. The toy box was real, and its purpose was as cruel as Cynthia had described. The defense attempted to cast doubt, suggesting exaggeration or confusion, but the weight of the physical evidence could not be denied. Photographs of the trailer, the instruments recovered, the audio tapes, and the journals all served as undeniable proof of Ray's intent and preparation. Forensic experts described the condition of the trailer and its contents in detail, ensuring the jury understood that this was not improvisation, but years of planning. Cindy Hendy's cooperation further solidified the case. On the stand, she admitted her role, but she also described Ray's obsession with control, his methods of selecting victims, and his insistence that they would never escape. Her words were damning, not only for herself, but for Ray, whose carefully hidden world was now exposed in full view of the public. The trial captured national attention. Media outlets across the country reported on the toy box, struggling to convey the full horror without crossing into details too graphic for broadcast. In New Mexico, the community followed every development, horrified to learn that such crimes had occurred in their midst. The court became the stage where years of secrecy were finally confronted. In the end, David Parker Ray was sentenced to more than 224 years in prison. Cindy Hendy received a sentence of 36 years for her role. His daughter, Glenda Jessie Ray, who had also been implicated, was given a shorter sentence for her involvement. Justice, though partial without murder convictions, had at least brought accountability. Yet for many it felt incomplete because the unanswered question remained: what had truly happened to the dozens of women referenced in his journals? David Parker Ray would never fully answer that question. In 2002, only 3 years after his conviction, he died of a heart attack in prison, taking his secrets with him. The verdict closed the legal proceedings, but the truth of how many lives he had ended would remain buried in the desert sands of New Mexico. The trial of David Parker. Ray may have ended with his conviction, but the questions it left behind lingered heavily over the community and the nation. In Truth or Consequences, people struggled to reconcile the image of a quiet mechanic with the horrifying reality of the toy box. Neighbors who had once waved to Ray or exchanged small talk at the gas station now realized they had lived alongside a man capable of unimaginable cruelty. The desert town, once defined by its stillness, became linked forever to the crimes of the man now known as the Toy Box Killer. For survivors like Cynthia Vigil, the aftermath was both relief and burden. She had escaped with her life, but the memories of the trailer could never be erased. Her testimony helped ensure that Ray would never harm another woman again. But for Cynthia and the others who survived, justice did not erase the trauma. Every sound, every memory of that recording, every flash of the chains inside the trailer remained with them long after the courtroom had emptied. Their courage in speaking out brought Ray to justice, but it also meant reliving the very experiences that nearly destroyed them. Law enforcement, too, was left unsettled. The FBI believed that Ray had killed many more women than the courts could prove. His journals referenced names and details that never matched official missing persons reports. He described encounters in meticulous detail, and the sheer number of entries suggested a timeline that stretched far beyond what had been presented at trial. Investigators searched the desert, scoured Elephant Butte Lake, and followed every lead that might point to hidden burial sites. Yet no bodies were ever recovered. The silence of the desert remained unbroken, keeping its secrets buried beneath miles of sand and rock. This absence of physical evidence gave rise to theories that persist to this day. Some believe Ray had accomplices beyond Cindy Hendy and his daughter. If others had helped him, perhaps they had played a role in disposing of victims, scattering remains so effectively that no trace could ever be found. Others speculated that Ray had perfected his methods of concealment, using the vast emptiness of the New Mexico wilderness as his cover. With so much land unsearched and so many years gone by, the likelihood of ever recovering his victims diminished with time. The case also sparked discussions on how such crimes could go undetected for decades. Ray's ability to operate in secrecy raised troubling questions about oversight, about the vulnerabilities of isolated communities, and about the stigma that silenced many of his victims. Women who were sex workers, runaways, or struggling with addiction often found little support or credibility when they came forward. In this way, Ray was able to target those most vulnerable, confident that their voices would not carry weight. In the years following the trial, the case became a reference point in law enforcement circles. It emphasized the need for better tracking of missing persons, improved coordination between agencies, and deeper attention to the voices of those who survived abuse. But despite the lessons learned, the legacy of David Parker Ray remains unfinished. The unanswered questions are too many, the missing too numerous, the silence of the desert too deep. Even after Ray's death in 2002, investigators and families of missing women have continued to wonder how many lives he truly claimed. For every journal entry without a name, for every missing woman who was never found, the shadow of the toy box lingers. It is a reminder that justice, while served in the courtroom, did not resolve the mystery buried beneath the sands of New Mexico. The story of David Parker Ray does not end with his conviction, nor with his death in 2002. What lingers is the impact his crimes left on survivors, investigators, and society at large. To reflect on this case is to confront not only the unimaginable cruelty of one man, but also the vulnerabilities that allowed him to act unchecked for so long. The Toy Box case reminds us that monsters do not always appear as strangers lurking in the shadows. Sometimes they live quietly within communities, blending into the ordinary rhythms of everyday life. Neighbors who once borrowed tools from Ray, or waved to him in passing later, admitted they never suspected he was capable of such atrocities. It forces us to ask how often violence hides in plain sight, concealed by ordinary appearances and unremarkable routines. For survivors like Cynthia Vigil, Kelly Garrett, and Angelica Montano, their strength became a beacon in a story dominated by horror. They endured experiences that most could not imagine, yet they stood in courtrooms and faced the man who had tried to strip them of their humanity. Their courage gave voice to the silent, and without them, the toy box may never have been exposed. Their stories remind us that survival is not only an act of endurance, but also of extraordinary strength. The case also reshaped the way law enforcement viewed missing persons investigations. The possibility that Ray claimed dozens of victims, most of whom were never found, exposed gaps in how disappearances were tracked and investigated. Many of the women who vanished were marginalized, sex workers, runaways, or women struggling with addiction. Their disappearances were too easily dismissed, their voices too often ignored. The Toy Box case highlighted the cost of that neglect and underscored the need for every missing person to be taken seriously, regardless of background. In the broader true crime community, the story of David Parker Ray stands apart. It is not widely dramatized, and for good reason. The details are so disturbing that even seasoned investigators admitted struggling to process them. FBI agents described the tapes and journals as among the most unsettling evidence they had ever encountered. The level of planning, the psychological cruelty, and the sheer scale of the suspected crimes push this case beyond what most audiences can bear. It remains one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. Yet, as horrifying as it is, the story compels us to remember. It compels us to ask difficult questions. How many victims remain unidentified? Could others have been complicit in his crimes? And how many more cases like this exist, hidden in the silence of forgotten towns and overlooked lives? The reflection is not only about David Parker Ray, but about vigilance, justice, and memory. It is about acknowledging that evil can take root anywhere, and that the responsibility to confront it belongs to all of us. The toy box is gone, dismantled by investigators, but its legacy remains. It stands as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist behind closed doors, and the courage it takes to expose it. If you found this story compelling, I encourage you to share your thoughts. What do you believe happened to the women never found? Do you believe the desert of New Mexico still holds the secrets of David Parker Ray's crimes? Your perspective matters, and your voice adds to the ongoing conversation about justice and remembrance. And if you wish to continue exploring the darkest corners of true crime, remember to like, share, and subscribe so that together we can confront these stories, honor the victims, and ensure that their voices are never forgotten.